The day I graduated with my MBA from Harvard Business School should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. Instead, it became the day I decided to show my parents exactly what a disappointment could achieve. "Look at your cousin Peter," Dad said, barely glancing at my diploma. "He didn't need fancy degrees. He joined the family business right after high school and now he's managing 3 departments at Wilson Manufacturing." Mom adjusted her designer scarf, bought with money from the same family business that had funded everything except my education. "We just don't understand why you wasted 6 years studying when you could have been learning the real business from the ground up." I looked around at my classmates and their beaming families. Hugs, tears of joy, proud parents taking photos. Meanwhile, my parents hadn't even waited for the ceremony to start criticizing my choices. "I wanted to learn different perspectives," I explained for the 100th time. "Modern business strategies, innovative approaches dash. Different perspectives?" Dad scoffed. "Wilson Manufacturing has been running the same way for 40 years. We're the largest industrial equipment manufacturer in the state. What could your textbooks teach you that generations of real experience couldn't?" I bit back a response about their declining market share, outdated production methods, and the 3 competitors who were slowly but surely eating away at their customer base. I'd analyzed their company for my final thesis, not that they'd bothered to read it when I'd sent it to them. "Even with your degree, you're still a disappointment," Dad declared, checking his watch. "We need to leave early. There's an emergency board meeting about the Thompson contract." The Thompson contract, their biggest client, threatening to leave for a more innovative competitor. Another problem they could have avoided if they'd listened to my suggestions about modernizing their production line. "Go," I said quietly. "I have some job interviews to prepare for anyway." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Job interviews? The position at Wilson Manufacturing is still open. Where else would you work? Somewhere that values new ideas, perhaps." Dad's face reddened. "You ungrateful dash," he stopped himself, straightening his tie. "Fine. Go work for someone else. But don't come crying to us when you fail." They left before the ceremony ended. I sat alone watching other families celebrate, my Harvard diploma feeling heavy in my hands. My phone buzzed. A message from Michael Chin, my former roommate who now worked at one of the largest investment firms in Boston. "Ready to execute Project Phoenix?" I looked at my parents' retreating backs, thought about the detailed analysis I'd done of their company's vulnerabilities, and the plan I'd spent 2 years developing. "Yes," I typed back. "Start phase 1. What my parents didn't know was that their disappointing child had spent the last 2 years not just studying but preparing. While they dismissed my education, I'd been building connections, analyzing markets, and raising capital through strategic investments. Most importantly, I'd been watching Wilson Manufacturing's stock price steadily decline as their outdated methods and resistant-to-change management drove the company toward disaster. They thought I was preparing for job interviews. In reality, I was preparing to show them exactly what their biggest disappointment could do. "Time to see who's disappointed in whom," I muttered, sending another text to Michael. "Initiate the first stock purchase. Keep it quiet." The game was about to begin, and my parents had no idea they'd already made their first move by walking away from their biggest asset, me. Over the next 3 months, I orchestrated the most intricate business strategy of my life. While my parents struggled to keep Wilson Manufacturing afloat, I moved my pieces carefully across the board. The Thompson contract was the first domino to fall. After my parents' failed board meeting, Thompson Industries announced they were taking their $50 million contract elsewhere. Wilson Manufacturing's stock plummeted 30% in a single day. "Perfect timing," Michael said as we watched the numbers drop. Through our carefully constructed shell company, Phoenix Enterprises, we'd been quietly buying shares every time the price dipped. "Your father still won't consider modernizing the production line?" "Just got off the phone with my cousin Peter," I replied, reviewing our latest acquisition reports. Dad called an emergency meeting to announce they're doubling down on their tried-and-true methods. Called modern automation unnecessary expense. 2 weeks later, their second-largest client jumped ship. The stock fell another 25%. My mother called that evening, the first time since graduation. "Are you seeing what's happening to our company?" she demanded. "This is why we needed you to learn the business the proper way, not waste time with theoretical degrees." I muted my phone so she couldn't hear me typing instructions to our acquisition team. Actually, Mom, I think this proves my point about needing to modernize dash. Oh, don't start with that again. Your father needs you to come home and learn the real way to run this business. No more of this new age nonsense. I declined their job offer again, knowing it would make them angry enough to ignore Phoenix Enterprises' growing ownership of their company's stock. By now, we controlled nearly 30% of shares through various subsidiaries. The killing blow came when their bank called in their loans early. They'd violated several terms of their lending agreement due to the lost contracts. My parents needed $100 million in 2 weeks, or they'd lose everything. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, Peter texted me. Uncle's looking for investors. Says he'd rather sell to strangers than change how we do things. I smiled, sending one final set of instructions to our legal team. Tomorrow would be interesting. The board meeting room was packed when I arrived. My parents sat at the head of the table looking older than I'd ever seen them. Board members muttered anxiously among themselves. Nobody noticed me slip into a seat at the back. As you know, Dad began, his voice tired, we face unprecedented challenges. However, I'm pleased to announce we found a buyer. Phoenix Enterprises has offered to purchase a controlling interest in Wilson Manufacturing. Murmurs filled the room. Someone asked, "Who are they?" "A private investment firm," Mom added quickly. "They've promised to maintain current management and our traditional methods." I couldn't help myself. "Are you sure about that?" Every head turned. Dad's face darkened. "What are you doing here?" "This is a private board meeting." "Actually," I stood up, straightening my suit jacket. "As CEO of Phoenix Enterprises, I have every right to be here." The silence was absolute. Mom's designer scarf slipped from her shoulders. Dad's face went from red to white in seconds. "That's impossible," he whispered. I walked to the front of the room, placing my briefcase on the table. "Would you like to see the paperwork? Or perhaps the business plan I developed during my wasteful years at Harvard?" Peter dropped his coffee cup. The sound of it shattering matched the breaking of my parents' illusions perfectly. "You." Mom's voice shook. "You're the buyer?" "Phoenix Enterprises now owns 47% of Wilson Manufacturing," I confirmed. "And yes, we're maintaining current management until the end of the month. Then we begin implementing the modernization strategy one outlined in my thesis. The one you never bothered to read." "This is ridiculous," Dad exploded, standing up. "We won't sell to you. The board won't approve this." I opened my briefcase calmly, removing a stack of documents. "The board already has. Check your emails. The vote was completed electronically an hour ago. 17 in favor, 3 against." Board members pulled out their phones, confirming my words. Most had been quietly supportive of modernization for years but feared opposing my father. "Traitors," Dad sputtered, looking around the room. After 40 years of refusing to adapt," I corrected. "Let me show you something." I connected my laptop to the room's display system. This is Wilson Manufacturing's market share over the last decade. The downward trend was stark. Several board members winced. "And this," I continued, switching slides, "is my complete modernization strategy. Automated production lines, digital inventory management, green energy integration. Conservative estimate shows 40% cost reduction and 60% productivity increase within 18 months. Mom found her voice. "The cost, we can't afford." "Phoenix Enterprises can," I interrupted. "We've secured $500 million in modernization funding. The contracts are signed. The equipment arrives next week. You can't just walk in here and change everything." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "This company is our legacy. A legacy you were running into the ground." I turned to face him fully. "Tell me, Dad, what's more disappointing, a child who gets an MBA from Harvard, or parents who'd rather bankrupt their company than admit their way isn't working?" The room fell silent again. Board members looked between us, witnessing 40 years of stubbornness collide with modern reality. "You did this to prove a point?" Mom asked quietly. "No. I did this to save the company. To save the jobs of 2,000 employees who depend on Wilson Manufacturing. To transform a dying business into something that can compete in the modern world." I softened my tone. "And yes, maybe a little bit to show you that sometimes the biggest disappointments can surprise you." Peter cleared his throat. "The modernization plan, It's impressive, cousin. Will there be training for current management? Of course. I nodded to him. Those willing to learn new methods are welcome to stay. Those who aren't. I looked meaningfully at my father. Dad stood up slowly. You think you can run this company better than me? I already am. I handed him a tablet showing real-time market reactions. Wilson Manufacturing's stock was soaring on news of the Phoenix acquisition and modernization plan. The market seems to agree. He stared at the numbers, decades of certainty crumbling. Finally, he looked up at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time since I'd chosen Harvard over his shop floor. You planned this all along? I spent 6 years learning how to save this company, I confirmed. While you spent 6 years calling me a disappointment. Mom started crying softly. Board members began quietly leaving the room, sensing the family drama unfolding. The choice is yours, I continued. Stay as advisors, learn the new systems, be part of the company's future. Or retire with your dignity and generous compensation packages. And if we stay? Dad asked, his voice rough. Then you'll report to me. Your disappointing child becomes your boss. Think you can handle that? The silence stretched. Finally, Dad did something I'd never seen him do, he laughed. A real, genuine laugh that carried decades of tension. You know, he said, wiping his eyes, I was wrong at your graduation. You're not a disappointment. You're exactly what this company needed. 6 months later, Wilson Manufacturing had transformed. The automated production lines hummed efficiently, solar panels covered the roof, and our market share was climbing steadily. Dad actually attended management training sessions, his initial resistance giving way to genuine interest in modern methods. Mom stopped commenting on my life choices, especially after our stock price tripled. Peter became our innovation director, proving that old dogs could indeed learn new tricks. Me. I kept my Harvard diploma in my new office, right next to a photo from that graduation day when my parents walked away from their disappointment. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong, it's proving yourself right. And sometimes the biggest disappointments become the proudest achievements. As for Wilson Manufacturing, we're now the most innovative industrial equipment manufacturer in the country. Turns out a little disappointment can go a long way. Dad still comes to my office every week not to criticize but to learn. And sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking, I catch him showing visitors his child's Harvard diploma with pride. Funny how success can change what disappoints people, isn't it?